right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DotPro. I am BreakyCPK, going to be your host here, of course, for today. And boy, do we got a fun show ahead of you. We got plenty to talk about, to say the least, and going to be joined by ZRock, as always, later on to do plenty of that discussion, talking about how a lot of these qualifiers have been going so far, talk results from the qualifiers, as well as other qualifiers that are currently taking place. Qualifiers. That's pretty much the word to use right now when it comes to competitive Dota 2. In the future shows, the future weeks to come, it'll be more the lands and the minors and mages actually getting started. But for now, we got a lot of qualifiers and we got a lot of Dota as a result. So we're going to be talking all about that. Also going to be talking about some minor roster shuffles happening. Also, going to be joined by the great Peter Pandan, PPD, who is now, of course, of Optic Gaming, formerly of Team Dire, now known as Optic Gaming. It's the same roster, of course, and everything. They just officially got picked up by the great esport organization that is. So we're going to be joined by him to talk about that, how the roster shuffle went in general, and how the results have been so far for him and his team. So we're really looking forward to having him on and getting to discuss some good stuff there. Now, to kick off the show, though, before we get into all of that, so I mentioned last week that I kind of thought the idea of the good, the bad, and the ugly, just as fun as that was to use for a while there, I realized over time that it just didn't really make sense because it was way more focused on negative than positive, and I'm a positive guy, you know. I like to keep things positive as much as possible. It's important to talk about the negative things sometimes, sure, but I like to keep things positive, so the idea of sticking with that theme, as fun of a name as it was, just really didn't make a lot of sense. And it was pretty cool because I both got tweets and even emails from some of the listeners out there with suggestions on maybe how I could change that up a little bit, and I'm gonna try one, and it's a pretty simple one, but shout out to Eric here for sending this suggestion. We're just going to simply go with good news, bad news, all right? So this way we're not stuck to a certain amount necessarily either way. It's just simply straight up good news, bad news. Let's do it. As far as the good news is concerned, on top of just amazing amount of Dota that's going on, I've actually been very, very busy this week. In fact, right off the bat, I should apologize here for this show being a little bit later on than usual. It's here Friday afternoon. Normally the show would have already been out for a while. However, I've been casting every single day these last couple of weeks, it feels like, and that's going to continue on moving forward here for a while. And I'm not complaining. This is what I want, and it's freaking amazing. It's great, but it does take up a lot of time. And by the end of like yesterday, I had a 10+ hours casting day, and then I actually had some stuff to do later on as well, so I just really wasn't able to fit in a window to do the show recording. So that's why it's happening today. Again, hopefully it's not that big of a deal for you guys. I do apologize, though. Try not to make it a trend moving forward. Anyways, there's a lot of Dota going on, and with that, we are getting a lot of these results now. Now, again, I'm going to talk later on with ZRock about specifics of these results. But one thing really that's standing out to me, and I know a lot of people, the diversity of results we're having, specifically in the North American region, is pretty damn ridiculous. In the North American region alone, we already have qualifiers. 4 different teams have qualified for 4 different events. We had the BTS Minor with the King's Cup initially, of course. Then Team Dire at the time, now known as Optic Gaming, they qualified for that one. We then had Complexity qualifying for the Star Ladder event here, the first minor of the season. Complexity represented North America there, though. And then in the PGL Open, which is actually a minor itself, Immortals, the new Immortal squad, they ended up qualifying out of North America. So Immortals representing the NA region at that new squad right there. And then, of course, you have the major, the ESL major, which the ones you would almost expect. ESL going to be sending Evil Geniuses out of North America to represent the region there, and deservingly so for them. And on that note, too, I find it interesting how Evil Geniuses, the start to the season, people were in maybe not the most impressed with them to kick it off, but just like Team Dire with the same situation with them, they got off to a slow start. It's a long season, man. And Evil Geniuses, they qualify for the first major, so good for them. So here we are with 4 minors and majors for North America at least. And it's 4 different teams. So the diversity is real. It's great to say. I will also say, and probably more expected though, is China is definitely bringing out quite the diversity as too. But again, that's expected, let's be honest. When it comes to the amount of teams over there, we've known this for a long time. So I believe it's actually similar, if not the same over there, where they have 3 or 4 different teams for each of these qualifiers. But NA is really the one that's standing out because we've been saying for a while now that North America, the scene has been getting tougher and tougher as time has gone on here. And now we have results to show that. And I think it's important that we're getting this too, and it's healthy for the scene because it does make a point that, one, this format's working. This new structure of having the forced qualifiers from all the regions and how it's all set up, that teams such as Evil Geniuses, teams such as OG, all these big top tier teams are having to qualify for said events, and in a lot of the cases, they're still not. I mean, Evil Genius has been knocked out a couple times. OG hasn't qualified for one yet. They've been knocked out, I want to say, 3 different events so far. They have yet to qualify, actually, for a minor or major. But again, the way I see that, I think it's healthy. I think it's great. And so big shout out to all the diversity that we are seeing, again, specifically in the NA region. Now, that leads me to the bad news. And again, I'll get into this a little bit more later on with ZRock, kind of curious on his opinion. But we had a situation here with the ESL Major event where there was a couple of roster stand-in that happened. And, off the bat, okay, well, what's the big deal there? It's understandable. Players can't make there's so much Dota. It's okay, I get that. However, this was pretty interesting for me because in one case, Resolution, who is now of OG, of course, they got knocked out of the ESL Major in the European region. He then later on that day, it was either later on that day or the next day, but he then was a stand-in for Team Empire in the CIS region in the very same event. Yes, it was a different region, but still, it's for the same qualifying event. And to me, that seems like a ridiculous thing that's even allowed. I don't, I mean, and again, maybe I'm just overthinking it. Maybe I'm just way too passionate about it in the first place. But as somebody that, watches traditional sports all the time and kind of takes that background into consideration, it would be like in the NBA, for example, like the Lakers suggesting one of their players is injured, and so borrowing a player from Oklahoma is like being like, hey, Russell, hey, Westbrook, come on over. We need you for a couple of games. We realize you don't have a couple of games these next couple of days with OKC. Come on over, play for us, help us win, and then you can go back, okay? Oh, sure, why not? No, that's not allowed. No, I know we're on a much different scale here, and there's a lot of different lines of reasoning as to why this was allowed, but for me, it just feels like it shouldn't be, right? But so there's that example. The one saving grace is that at least it was a different region. It wasn't the same event technically because it was a different region. However, there was another example in this very same tournament where Leal's style of Infamous Young, actually, he plays for the new Infamous Young team over in South America. They got knocked out, and then later on in the tournament, it might have even been the very next round, he then played for Infamous. He plays for Infamous. They got knocked out. He then played for Infamous Young because he was knocked out with Infamous, and they needed a stand-in. I'm doing the motion right now where you put your hands to your temple or your forehead, and you push them outward, and you kind of explode your fingers. I'm sure you guys can know what I'm doing. Anyways, mind blowing right there. That it just this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong about this. That a player can just willy-nilly play for one team and then play for another, let alone from one region to the next, but in the same region tournament on top of that. And it also leads me to another point where I think it's ridiculous to when we want to constantly see this amateur scene grow, come up, and it's already so difficult to break into the competitive scene in the first place. These are opportunities that should open the chances for these amateur, not even necessarily these up-and-coming players, to give them a shot. Because to sit here and tell me that if you're Empire, the only player that you have as a stand-in is Resolution. He's the only person on your friends list in your contact, so they should be able to use him. No, that's not the organization. That's not anyone else's fault but them. They should have contacts with many more plethora of people. Look, I'm not saying it's easy, but maybe we need to start making it more of a thing. Maybe Valve needs to make that more of a stricter thing, where the reason why they're doing it is because they can, right? Like, obviously they did this because it's not against the rules, but it needs to be a rule maybe where you can't just pick up another player from another team just because you don't have contacts of other players. Like, there are hundreds of thousands Dota 2 players in the world, and I know we're not talking about everyone's top tier by any stretch of the imagination, and it gets much more limited the higher you go up and the higher skill cap. But there's still plenty of players out there at the top level of play that can definitely still bring something to the table that just really aren't known about. That is still a thing. I don't care what, there's nothing that can prove otherwise to me, because simply put, they really don't get the chances that they should. And this is one of those barriers that's preventing that. If a team's allowed to just simply use another player, another star player, really in both of these cases, in their respective regions, of course. I mean, Leostar is a hell of a player from the South America region. He's been around for a long time. You shouldn't be allowed to have that as an option. They should be forced to use some newer player if, for whatever reason, one of their players can't actually be there to play, thus giving said player an opportunity and just legitimizing the whole thing. I don't know. We'll talk with ZRock later on, see what he thinks about it, get a different perspective as well. But that's my good news, bad news. Let me know how you enjoyed that segment, guys. But anyways, I don't want to keep rambling on here because I got a really awesome guest coming at you, especially since we didn't have a guest last week's show as well. Really cool that we were able to get Peter Pandam on. He's going to talk about the new Optic Gaming team, the roster shuffle, everything that's been happening lately. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be back. A lot of qualifiers, and we got a lot of Dota as a result. So we're going to be talking all about that. Also going to be talking about some minor roster shuffles happening. Also going to be joined by the great Peter Pandam, PPD, who is now, of course, of Optic Gaming, formerly of Team Dire, now known as Optic Gaming. It's the same roster, of course, and everything. They just officially got picked up by the great esport organization that is. So we're going to be joined by him to talk about that, how the roster shuffle went in general, and how the results have been so far for him and his team. So we're really looking forward to having him on and getting to discuss some good stuff there. Now, to kick off the show, though, before we get into all of that, so I mentioned last week that I kind of thought the idea of the good, the bad, and the ugly, just as fun as that was to use for a while there, I realized over time that it just didn't really make sense because it was way more focused on negative than positive, and I'm a positive guy, you know. I like to keep things positive as much as possible. It's important to talk about the negative things sometimes, sure, but I like to keep things positive. So the idea of sticking with that theme, as fun of a name as it was, just really didn't make a lot of sense. And it was pretty cool because I both got tweets and even emails from some of the listeners out there with suggestions on maybe how I could change that up a little bit. And I'm gonna try one, and it's a pretty simple one, but shout out to Eric here for sending this suggestion. We're just going to simply go with good news, bad news, all right? So this way we're not stuck to a certain amount necessarily either way. It's just simply straight up good news, bad news. Let's do it. As far as the good news is concerned, on top of just amazing amount of Dota that's going on, I've actually been very, very busy this week. In fact, right off the bat, I should apologize here for this show being a little bit later on than usual. It's here Friday afternoon. Normally the show would have already been out for a while. However, I've been casting every single day these last couple of weeks, it feels like, and that's going to continue on moving forward here for a while. And I'm not complaining. This is what I want, and it's freaking amazing. It's great, but it does take up a lot of time. And by the end of yesterday, I had a 10 plus hours casting day. And then I actually had some stuff to do later on as well, so I just really wasn't able to fit in a window to do the show recording. So that's why it's happening today. Again, hopefully it's not that big of a deal for you guys. I do apologize, though. Try not to make it a trend moving forward. Anyways, there's a lot of Dota going on, and with that, we are getting a lot of these results now. Now, again, I'm going to talk later on with ZRock about specifics of these results. But one thing really that's standing out to me, and I know a lot of people, the diversity of results we're having specifically in the North American region is pretty damn ridiculous. In the North American region alone, we already have qualifiers. 4 different teams have qualified for 4 different events. We had the BTS Minor with the King's Cup initially, of course. Then Team Dire at the time, now known as Optic Gaming, they qualified for that one. We then had Complexity qualifying for the Star Ladder event here, the first minor of the season. Complexity representing North America there, though. And then in the PGL Open, which is actually a minor itself, Immortals, the new Immortal squad, they ended up qualifying out of North America. So Immortals representing the NA region at that new squad right there. And then, of course, you have the major, the ESL major, which the ones you would almost expect. ESL going to be sending Evil Geniuses out of North America to represent the region there, and deservingly so for them. And on that note, too, I find it interesting how Evil Geniuses, the start to the season, people were maybe not the most impressed with them to kick it off, but just like Team Dire with the same situation with them, they got off to a slow start. It's a long season, man, and Evil Geniuses, they qualify for the first major, so good for them. So here we are with 4 minors and majors for North America at least, and it's 4 different teams. So the diversity is real. It's great to say. I will also say, and probably more expected though, is China is definitely bringing out quite the diversity as too. But again, that's expected, let's be honest. When it comes to the amount of teams over there, we've known this for a long time. So I believe it's actually similar, if not the same over there, where they have 3 or 4 different teams for each of these qualifiers. But NA is really the one that's standing out, because we've been saying for a while now that North America, the scene has been getting tougher and tougher as time has gone on here. And now we have results to show that. And I think it's important that we're getting this too, and it's healthy for the scene, because it does make a point that, one, this format's working. This new structure of having the forced qualifiers from all the regions and how it's all set up, that teams such as Evil Geniuses, teams such as OG, all these big top tier teams are having to qualify for said events. And in a lot of the cases, they're still not. I mean, Evil Geniuses has been knocked out a couple times. OG hasn't qualified for one yet. They've been knocked out, I want to say, of 3 different events so far. They have yet to qualify, actually, for a minor or major. But again, the way I see that, I think it's healthy. I think it's great. And so big shout out to all the diversity that we are seeing, again, specifically in the NA region. Now, that leads me to the bad news. And again, I'll get into this a little bit more later on with ZRock, kind of curious on his opinion. But we had a situation here with the ESL major event where there was a couple of roster stand-in that happened. And, off the bat, okay, well, what's the big deal there? It's understandable. Players can't make there's so much Dota. It's okay, I get that. However, this was pretty interesting for me because in one case, Resolution, who is now of OG, of course, they got knocked out of the ESL major in the European region. He then later on that day, it was either later on that day or the next day, but he then was a stand-in for Team Empire in the CIS region in the very same event. Yes, it was a different region, but still, it's for the same qualifying event. And to me, that seems like a ridiculous thing that's even allowed. I don't, I mean, and again, maybe I'm just overthinking it. Maybe I'm just way too passionate about it in the first place, but as somebody that, watches traditional sports all the time and kind of takes that background into consideration, it would be like in the NBA, for example, like the Lakers suggesting one of their players is injured, and so borrowing a player from Oklahoma is like being like, hey, Russell, hey, Westbrook, come on over. We need you for a couple of games. We realize you don't have a couple of games these next couple of days with OKC. Come on over, play for us, help us win, and then you can go back, okay? Oh, sure, why not? No, that's not allowed. No, I know we're on a much different scale here, and there's a lot of different lines of reasoning as to why this was allowed, but for me, it just feels like it shouldn't be, right? But so there's that example. The one saving grace is that at least it was a different region. It wasn't the same event technically because it was a different region. However, there was another example in this very same tournament where Leal's style of Infamous Young, actually, he plays for the new Infamous Young team over in South America. They got knocked out, and then later on in the tournament, it might have even been the very next round, he then played for Infamous. He plays for Infamous. They got knocked out. He then played for Infamous Young because he was knocked out with Infamous, and they needed a stand-in. I'm doing the motion right now where you put your hands to your temple or your forehead, and you push them outward, and you kind of explode your fingers. The I'm sure you guys can know what I'm doing. Anyways, mind blowing right there. That it just this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong about this. That a player can just willy-nilly play for one team and then play for another, let alone from one region to the next, but in the same region tournament on top of that. And it also leads me to another point where I think it's ridiculous to when we want to constantly see this amateur scene grow, come up, and it's already so difficult to break into the competitive scene in the first place. These are opportunities that should open the chances for these amateur, not even necessarily these up-and-coming players, to give them a shot. Because to sit here and tell me that if you're Empire, the only player that you have as a stand-in is Resolution. He's the only person on your friends list in your contact, so they should be able to use him. No, that's not the organization. That's not anyone else's fault but them. They should have contacts with many more plethora. Look, I'm not saying it's easy, but maybe we need to start making it more of a thing. Maybe Valve needs to make that more of a stricter thing where the reason why they're doing it is because they can, right? Like, obviously they did this because it's not against the rules, but it needs to be a rule maybe where you can't just pick up another player from another team just because you don't have contacts of other players. Like, there are hundreds of thousands Dota 2 players in the world, and I know we're not talking about everyone's top tier by any stretch of the imagination, and it gets much more limited the higher you go up and the higher skill cap. But there's still plenty of players out there at the top level of play that can definitely still bring something to the table that just really aren't known about. That is still a thing. I don't care what, there's nothing that can prove otherwise to me, because simply put, they really don't get the chances that they should. And this is one of those barriers that's preventing that. If a team's allowed to just simply use another player, another star player, really in both of these cases, in their respective regions, of course. I mean, Leo Star is a hell of a player from the South America region. He's been around for a long time. You shouldn't be allowed to have that as an option. They should be forced to use some newer player if, for whatever reason, one of their players can't actually be there to play, thus giving said player an opportunity and just legitimizing the whole thing. I don't know. We'll talk with ZRock later on, see what he thinks about it, get a different perspective as well. But that's my good news, bad news. Let me know how you enjoyed that segment, guys. But anyways, I don't want to keep rambling on here because I got a really awesome guest coming at you, especially since we didn't have a guest last week's show as well. Really cool that we were able to get Peter Pandam on. He's going to talk about the new Optic Gaming team, the roster shuffle, everything that's been happening lately. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be back. All right, guys, I am super excited now to be joined by the man himself, the one they call PPD. How's it going, man?
Optic PPD now.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
How does that feel to say? Optic PPD.
It's fun. It's fun to be back on like an established team. Happy to be repping some sponsors and repping an org once again instead of our vague, the Dire.
Dear God, what was the deal with that name? Was it a troll? Answer me now. Well, was it a troll or was it just some random name you came up with?
It was it was a very calculated troll. We had a couple of other ideas. We said maybe coming soon or highest bidder. Some kind of like funny words, but we didn't want to kind of make it like we were just going to sign up with an org just for whoever paid us the most, or we didn't want coming soon and then people being out there hunting for who we might be joining. So we tried to pick to something that was playful, but obviously temporary.
I feel like you guys made a point to be on the Radiant side quite a bit too, on purpose.
Yeah,
but
I think we've been favoring the Radiant side, as have many other teams.
Yeah. Well, why is that? On a serious note, like from strategy-wise, why do you guys favor the Radiant side?
Wow, that's a
bold question, I know.
That's a pretty meta question. I'm not sure how comfortable I am answering that. No, it's just about the map movement. I think that it's potentially easier for the Radiant side to play on the top side of the map and the Dire to play on the bottom side of the map. And the top side of the map has Roshan on it, which is just the way people are moving on the map in this meta. It just seems like the top half of the map is better to have control of because Roshan's there. So it's similar to how it used to be where it was Dire was on Dire was better because it was on the top side of the map, and that's where Roshan was. He was on the top half, right?
Yeah. Now
the map's more split vertically than diagonally, I guess. I'm sorry. The map is split more horizontally than diagonally.
That makes sense.
Whereas before it was kind of vertical, right? So the right side of the map where the old Roche pit was the better side, and the left side was the weaker side, and it was kind of it was across the river, so it was Radiant, and then it was Dire. But now it's like top and bottom, so the top side's better, and the top side is Radiant.
Do you wish they made a mode where it's like Radiant heroes versus Dire heroes? Wasn't that a Dota 1 thing?
Yeah, that was definitely a thing. There was a couple. I remember some really old patches on the Warcraft 3 Dota 1 where if you were Radiant, you could only pick Radiant heroes.
I think I remember that actually. Oh boy, those are some old days right there. Yeah. All right, I want to go back here to the roster shuffle post TI. Of course, you just got finished doing the casting thing at the TI event this last year. Obviously, been a very interesting year for you, involved with EG, more on the management side. But then the roster shuffle came about, and you had made kind of the announcement that you were looking to get back to playing, basically, or at least that rumor came out. What was the roster shuffle like? Were you basically? Did you have an idea of a team that you wanted going into TI7 almost, or how did that come about?
I really didn't know who was potentially available for a team. It was, pretty easy to maybe start with the X Planet Odd team because they had been eliminated in the qualifiers. But we're still they have all of those players are pretty much playing on tier 1 teams right now, excluding a couple. And by tier 1, I mean like teams that are signed and teams that are getting paid to do this, and to play video games for a living, sort of a thing. Not like really like tier 1 skill, I guess.
Okay.
People get funny about the tiers, right? So I don't want to call my team tier 1.
Don't insult people now, yeah.
When we haven't been, we haven't won everything. So maybe we're like tier 2 or tier 1.5, but whatever. We're doing this. We're committed. We're getting paid. Like life's good, right?
Yeah.
So it was, I have a ton of respect for TI and I have a ton of respect for all the teams and players, but that tournament is pretty cutthroat, and Dota has always been incredibly cutthroat because people are super, super selfish because there's so much money on the line, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the Dota players, everybody is so incredibly competitive, and there's been some friendships that have lasted the strains of winning and losing, but most of them, winning fixes everything and losing is a problem. So when a team gets eliminated from TI, I think it's a pretty common assumption that most of these players are now free agents. So I, being this like spectator and not really being a part of the tournament, I just, patiently waited for, I watched the games. I tried to keep up. I was trying to learn as fast as possible about all of the Dota that was happening. But as these teams got eliminated, I started looking at a couple of these players on these teams that had been eliminated and said, I really think this guy is good. I would love to consider playing with him next year if he was open to it. So I just, slide in the DMs, pop him a little message, and say, hey, man, just wanted to let you know I'm going to be playing Dota next year, and I would love for you to consider the opportunity to potentially play with me. And that way people know that, and the word gets out that I'm interested in playing and that I'm now a part of this huge free agency, and I'm open to hearing offers and learning about opportunities.
Were you open to joining another team? Was that ever a thing, or did you want to create your own team?
I think a lot of the teams are pretty established. I think it was especially the 5-position support captain role. They kind of sit at like the helms of these teams, and they almost have in the majority of these teams, that 5-player really has the decision making on the roster, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like when I was on EG, it was for the most part up to me, until the final year. But when you go to Secret, for example, Puppy, Puppy's not going anywhere. Fly and No Tail, they're not going anywhere. Like they are going to be OG, and the opportunity for me as a 5-player to join one of these other teams, especially after not playing for a year, there's definitely some doubts and some concerns about how good I, can become once again for some people. And especially like the wanted thing when I kind of like played like this part-time team where nobody got paid and we practiced a couple of days a week, that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, and they were like, what happened there? Like, you tried to play and you were super unsuccessful. Like, and I was actually surprised because everybody kind of brought it up when I started talking to them about the idea of me playing. And I think that in hindsight, if I knew it was going to leave such a poor taste in everybody's mouth, I probably wouldn't have done it. It was really genuinely just I had a little bit more time on my hands than I expected to have, at least for that, month or two. And I was like, let's play some Dota. I love this game.
Well, it's obviously it kind of worked out in the end as far as you have a team now, but I don't want you to offend your teammates by any means, and answer it how you will. But I am curious, when you were envisioning this team, when it kind of started to be created, is this the roster that you almost envisioned, or you would have envisioned from the beginning, or did it kind of take a lot of turns throughout?
Oh wow, it took a lot of turns actually. There's a whole bunch of like theoretical rosters that could have happened that I could have been a part of. I was contacted by a couple guys, but it was mostly just me reaching out. There's a couple guys that I really wanted to play with. One of them was Misery. One of them was SVG, who's coaching EG. Okay. And obviously, if there was like a dream opportunity for me to play with S4, I wasn't going to say no to that. But that's just not realistic because OG was so successful last year, and even with having a disappointing TI result, it's pretty safe to say they were sticking together for the most part. Getting Zai on the team was a huge surprise. I had no idea what was going to happen with EG. I was just kind of patiently and contently waiting to just see what happens with all these rosters. I was committed to the idea of playing no matter what roster I was capable of building. I think that with what was available post-TI, I think I did a really good job. I think that we put together a really good team, and I think that we might go to some tournaments this year and maybe win a couple. I think that the potential is absolutely there, which is really exciting because I would have very gladly played with a lesser skilled team and spent this year working and training to become better and not necessarily expecting top results right out of the gate.
Okay. I mean, you're still a young guy, Peter. Like in the esports world, maybe not, maybe a little on the older side, but at the same time, you're still overall a young guy, right? So is it safe to say that you still plan to have a long future playing career? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I love the idea of continuing to play as long as Dota is a popular game. I love playing this game. I love competing. I love the community. I just, I want to embrace it. And even if whatever I stopped playing or maybe I wasn't good anymore, I would still love to be a part of it in any way that I could, whether that's as a caster or as a coach or as a substitute, like I have no idea. It's just really fun to be a part of everything that's happening.
Yeah. Obviously, with the season coming up too, was the announcement of this season and the format? Is it almost safe to say maybe that had some influence on you really wanting to come back and make the grind happen, or was that not? I think
I was already leaning to the idea of playing maybe like a 60-40 at that point. Definitely not certain. This wasn't like a really easy decision for me to make. But yeah, like seeing all the excitement around Dota 2 and hearing about all of these organizations that were interested in entering again, and all of the money that, was being brought in by these all these huge esport teams now have VC funding or angel investors or whatever it might be. So you hear that they're coming into Dota, and knowing like how much money Dota players are getting paid, it made sense for me to do this. And I was, now that I'm playing again, I'm not running a company. I have so much more time to be myself and do the things that I want to do and how I want to do them. And that freedom is so liberating for me as an individual. So
the roster announcement came out. The one name on the list, and I think it's safe to say that a lot of people almost that kind of reacted to, was CCNC, because, you had the four other players, yourself, Misery, Pycat, and Zai, very experienced players. They've been around the block for a while. CCNC, a very new player on the scene. He just kind of broke in this last year. Of course, was a caster at TI7. Why CCNC? Well, why is he your mid player, Peter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he's one of the rising stars of last year. The other kind of like hot mid player out of North America was potentially Bryle. A lot of people really like him. Saw him playing a bit in some of these qualifiers with Team Iceberg. I think he did really, really well. He's super young, 16 years old. I wasn't sure. Having a 16-year-old on a team presents all sorts of obstacles. I also just think I think the better bet for us was CC as our mid player. I'm a big fan of taking chances, I guess, gambling on new guys.
Yeah.
Just, maybe you never know. He could be a bomb, right? He could just not be good. Or he could be the greatest player ever. He could be the next Sumail. He could be the next Arteezy, the next Miracle, the next Anna. Like, you never know. And we could go out there and pick somebody else who's been in the scene forever, but just really didn't have like that star power. I think CC, I think he has it. I think he's a really hard worker. I think he's incredibly talented, and he's hungry. He's excited to win. He's excited to play.
You've obviously had even some success so far, is safe to say, including most noticeably the first event to kick everything off, the BTS minor qualifier with the King's Cup there. You guys ended up qualifying for. How important was that for you, do you think, to get off to such a great start with this whole tournament cycle coming up?
It was really nice. It was like our first tournament right when we started our boot camp. And everyone was super fresh, super excited to play. And we struggled in the very beginning when we were playing online, but once we got like together, we just kind of like ran over that tournament, and it was so nice to win something, to qualify, and to say like, guess what, guys, we qualified for an event.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to a minor. That means we're no longer like some posers. You know what I mean? Like, we're no longer Dota players trying to make it. We're Dota players who made it to some extent, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams out there that play in all these qualifiers but never win, or never get to go to LAN, never get to experience the fans, never get to sign with a team, never get to do all these cool things that is a huge part of what we're doing here. And the Summit, it's such a fun tournament. I hope you get the chance to go sometime. I have such a good time there, even as I went last time as a caster, and I've been there like 3 or 4, maybe 5 times as a player. It's always a pretty good time. Some summits better than others, but I'm super excited to go back.
It seems like one of those events as a player. It's a really, really fun event to go to. So I could imagine being super excited for that one, especially.
Yeah, they do a nice job. I really like what BTS has been creating over there.
Yeah. So that happened. Obviously then a lot more qualifiers started picking up, and that's when you made a tweet that kind of gained some attention. This is back.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, September
Drama.
21st here. I know, here we go. Essentially said, and I quote, teams being invited to major minors needs looked at. Tournament organizers are giving away TI qualifying points subjectively.
Ooh, Breaky's getting to the thick of it
There
right
you
now.
go.
I like
Here
this.
we go. I want this. I want answers now.
All right, ask away.
Well, so first off, you made that post. Obviously, it got quite a bit of traction. Were you surprised by the traction that it got? Were you kind of just, did you type that thinking like, yeah, I'll just share my opinion and whatever, but it maybe blew up more than you figured?
I think I have pretty good awareness of myself when it comes to like social media attraction. I kind of know what's going to get a lot of attention and what might kind of float under the radar. The point of that post was to bring publicity to it. So I think that its intention was successful. I think a lot of people looked at this and said, maybe there is something a little off here. And yeah, I think that, I mean, there's definitely some questionable stuff going on.
Yeah. One thing that you did mention, and you then posted a tweet longer to kind of go further into it, you were making it clear that you didn't necessarily mean that yourselves deserve an invite, but rather it's just something that should be monitored. I mean, the invites that we've had so far, outside of Team Secret, I feel like personally it's actually been okay. But even Team Secret now, with their success out of Europe that they've already shown, you know, you could almost make that argument maybe it's fair for them. Are you kind of second guessing yourself, or do you feel strongly by this opinion?
I think the secret quote was a little tongue-in-cheek. I think it was a little fun. I think Matt took personal offense or not personal offense, but maybe he could have been joking around too. I don't know. But he, decided to respond based on, he just assumed that I was talking about secret, which I kind of was, or I absolutely was. And I barked back at him and I gave him a little shit. And I said, hey, how come Team Secret, who hasn't won any qualifiers, who hasn't, didn't place well at TI, who just went through roster changes, why are they being invited to minors when everybody else is struggling through these qualifiers? And at the time, context is very important, right? If Secret had won 3 qualifiers and then somebody decided to invite them to a qualifier, maybe that's a different story. But even then, the teams that are getting invited to these tournaments are Liquid and Newbie and guys that, got top, 6 at TI and, didn't make roster changes. And I'm sure a lot of people declined Perfect World invitation. That's, absolutely. A lot of those top teams did. And maybe Secret was the next best opportunity. But maybe just add another qualifier spot. Send the top 2 teams in Europe. Let somebody fight for this spot rather than subjectively handing it to somebody without them really working for it. I'm pretty sure Cyborg Matt's been around the Dota space and especially the Chinese Dota space a lot, and he probably knows somebody at Perfect World, and they said, hey, we're looking for a team to invite. Would you guys be interested? And Matt goes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And if I was in Matt's position, I would absolutely say yes, 100 times out of 100 times. Why would I want my team to play in a qualifier when somebody wants to invite me? And there's nothing wrong with Secret saying yes, and I would, like I said, I would have done the same. However, I think that somebody offering that to somebody when they don't really earn it, I think there's something wrong there. Because now Team Secret has one less qualifier to play in, a greater opportunity to earn points towards TI, and more time on their schedule to practice without just showing every single game on stream, more time to practice and more time to play in other qualifiers and take a break from Dota and get some space and, get your mind right and really, be in a good place to play in these tournaments. And I think that privilege needs to be earned.
So that a lot of that I feel like was the player PPD talking to me, but you were getting at too, as you said, if you're in his shoes, I mean, you would have said the same thing. I mean, you have had that business side now being a part of EG and being I don't know if you necessarily had been part of a tournament organization itself, but I mean, I think it's understandable, right, that they want to invite teams that are going to draw the fan base in for these third party. I guess they're third party tournaments. Really, they just happen to influence points ultimately at the main event itself. But if a CIS region tournament wants to invite, say, a Na'Vi, it is kind of a fine line, right? Because for their audience, for their business, they want to do it for their success and to return money on their investment. Whereas
in my experiences with Valve and Eric Johnson, kind of the guy who's running Dota over there, they are incredibly interested in taking care of the players. They really don't care that much about these team orgs. They really don't care as much about these tournament organizers. They want things right for the players. That's their number one priority. And it's the whole secret thing. It's like one of those things, don't hate the player, hate the game. Because it's fine. It's fine. And everybody should be doing it. But I think the opportunities, I don't think that opportunity is necessary. Mm-hmm. Why not just have everyone qualify for the tournament? Why not, especially for these first ones, have everybody qualify for these tournaments and then take the top 4 teams at the major and invite them to all of those and then go down from that list. Somebody declines, invite the next person. Somebody declines, invite the next person. And it doesn't have to be this, oh, hey, who do you know? Or, hey, how popular are you? Or, hey, are you streaming a lot? Because you know what Valve wants TI to be? They want it to be the best competition in the world, competing at the highest level for this massive prize. And I don't, Valve's not going to invite Dendi every year because he's everybody's favorite player, right? They want to invite Dendi and Navi when Navi is a kick-ass team winning tournaments, right?
Like they are now.
Yeah, they're doing awesome. It's really cool to see Dendi have success. He's one of the nicest people that I know, and I'm very, very happy for him.
Yeah. Well, as I've always been saying, this is a trial season, right? And it's still very, very early on in the season. So could you see yourself maybe down the line as things do develop that, okay, maybe it's kind of balancing itself out. We're not getting these egregious invites necessarily constantly. It's working out in the end, and ultimately the teams that do deserve to go and get the points, are going to be going in the end? Or do you think that's wrong, and should Valve look to address this now?
Hold on, can you repeat that? Sorry.
So basically, do changes need to happen now, or do you feel like it's early on enough in the season where time, we can kind of let it play out a little bit more? Because again, there's still a lot of season left to see what happens. It's again a trial season of sorts. I'm sure though Valve is somebody who really likes to throw like an untested product out there and just kind of see what happens and let it develop naturally. And I'm sure that's exactly what's going to happen here. They're going to see, they're going to analyze and look at the system over the next 6 months and maybe make some changes, or maybe wait until next year and make some more changes to what they think might be better. Yeah. And I'm not really somebody to, I'm just kind of being loud and rowdy, and I just trying to bring attention to something that I think should be looked at for changes next year. Mm-hmm. But I'm the kind of the person who I'm just going to try and play the system to the best of my ability to ensure my team's success and my own. Fair enough. All right, so talking back on your play here recently in tournaments here. So you qualified for BTS. You had a hot start there. The following events you've done far. You've gone far, I should say, in several others. I believe you've made even 3 finals. You're mentioning as far as the qualifiers goes. Ultimately, not qualifying for a couple of those though. But overall, things have been going fairly well. There is one team out there though that has been giving you some issue as of late.
Is this the Breaky Complexity fanboy I'm about to hear?
I just happened to notice that Complexity has been having the success lately against you guys.
Kicking our ass on a regular basis. I think we're playing them tomorrow as well.
But what's the deal? What's the deal, Peter?
They're just, they're playing real well. Watching them today, they actually lost, I think, which was surprising. I don't know, it's weird. These NA teams, everybody's so back and forth. Right now, we're kind of on this losing spiral. Lost to Immortals, lost to Complexity 2 or 3 times. We had a forfeit against VGJ, but I don't know. It's so back and forth, right? 4 different teams are going to these events, and might even be potential for DC to win this perfect world tournament. And it's going to be a 5th new team winning a 5th qualifier. Yeah, it's a volatile time for North American Dota. There's a lot of back and forth. Hopefully, I think we were just a little burnout towards the end of the boot camp. You go to the hotel, and then you go to the LAN cafe, and then you go to a restaurant, and then you go back to the LAN cafe, then you go back to the hotel, and then it's just rinse and repeat for 10 days straight. And when you're away from your friends and your family in your own room, and you're in some hotel room, it wears on you, I think. So I think we got a little burnout towards the end of the boot camp.
That's understandable. But I will say, as excuse me, as a spectator, it's been pretty awesome seeing the diversity of teams. Like you pointed out, we potentially could even have a 5th NA team in DC qualifying if they happen to make their run successful in this perfect world event. So from a spectator, and I know that you can appreciate that too, that NA is just insanely competitive right now. I mean, you've been around for a long time. Is this the most competitive it's been? Yeah,
for sure. There was a time when I was on EG when we just like, oh, we got to play another qualifier. Okay, who do we got to walk over for? Who do we got to walk over for this? And there was a couple teams that gave us a nice run for our money, but inevitably we kind of won everything. That's not the case anymore. It's a little bit more difficult, and we see EG even losing to like the Leviathan. Like that's insane, right? Like that was incredible. Who knows, man? It's everybody's super tight and everybody's really good, and some teams have bad days and some teams have really good days.
Do you think the format is to thank for that, because we are having so many qualifiers and it's forcing all these teams, even the EGs, to play in the qualifiers? Is it fair to say that this new system, this new format, is a reason that we're getting all this competitive spirit in the NA scene and even all the regions, really?
Definitely. I think there's a little bit too much going on. I think that us playing complexity in a different qualifier every day is maybe not the healthiest thing, because like we don't really have time to practice, right?
Yeah.
Like we look at the last time we played complexity, and that's how we kind of view our game plan for the next time we play complexity. And it's almost like we have this little meta between us that just goes back and forth, but it's still the same. And like, obviously, like we're in a funk, we need to figure out something new. But like they just kind of like are just running us over with like the same kind of idea, and until we beat their idea, they're not going to change their idea. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like they're waiting for us to react with something good, so that way they can adjust.
Oh yeah, just the game of constantly adjusting.
Like, yeah. We saw DC today. They played against Complexity, and DC had I think they had the Tiny Wisp, and Complexity had Tiny Wisp, and DC ended up beating them, right? And Complexity beat us twice with Tiny Wisp. So they're like, okay, our first game against DC, let's go for Tiny Wisp. And DC's like, oh, of course they're going to go for Tiny Wisp. They just beat PPDC with Tiny Wisp 2 times in a row. So then DC devises a game plan to beat the Tiny Wisp. And then in the second game against DC, Complexity's doing something totally different. All of a sudden, Kyle is playing Ancient Apparition, a hero he probably hasn't played in 20 games.
Yeah.
And they're adjusting to the adjustments that are happening in this game. And unless like we are capable of watching every single game that's happening and putting our minds inside their minds and understanding why these adjustments are happening, the next time we play that person, we might be totally underprepared for the strategy that they're putting forth. So it's super convoluted and it's very complicated. We're just trying to do our best to keep up because there's so many games happening. I think something that we talked about is potentially finding somebody to help us, like as a coach, that could watch all these other series while we're practicing, while we're playing in other qualifiers, and kind of say, hey guys, this is where they're going, this is the direction that they're going with their draft, and this is the adjustments that they're making to these challenges that the other teams are throwing at them. Yeah, it's fun though, right?
It is.
It's fun.
You're going to play Dota, man, and as you said from the beginning, that's what you love to do. So it is just a lot of Dota.
I'm invested, right? You can hear it.
Yeah, so I could definitely can. It is fun to hear. I will say that is one thing that I have noticed, that if anything, with all of this Dota going on, that is a downside, and I imagine for the players and your teams, is that there's literally no scrim time, right? Like you're playing actual tournament match after actual, so you can't really try these different strategies.
Yeah, sometimes if we only have like one best of 3 during the day, we can get in like a warm up game beforehand, or do like a little best of 2 or something against one of the other teams. But even then, like that's almost treated as like warm up rather than trying new things. Like you're just trying to affirm the things that you've been working on and practicing that you think are good, rather than experimenting. Mm-hmm. It's really nice to have like 2 or 3 days to be like, hey guys, we're going to practice Wisp. We're going to play Wisp for the next 3 days, and we're going to work out all the ins and outs of this hero. And in this current schedule frenzy, that's really tough to do, because that time when you want to practice Wisp, that might be a match. And if you're not comfortable with this hero, then maybe you shouldn't be picking in an official.
Yeah. All right, so that leads us now to the announcement that, God, did this happen today? That happened yesterday, right? When did this happen? Optic Gaming.
What?
got announced.
Yesterday, yeah.
That was yesterday as we're doing this recording. That's right. Okay. So yesterday it came out later on that you guys officially being picked up by Optic Gaming. I imagine this is something that's been in the works for a while, or was this a very recent thing?
It's been in the works for a while, probably like 3 weeks, something like that. I mean, we've known for a while, but we kept it pretty top secret. I don't think a lot of people had guessed or figured it out. Super excited. I'm really happy that Optic is looking at the Dota space and saying yes. It's so many. That's like part of the excitement this year. Is all these major orgs that are in League of Legends, that are in Call of Duty, are in Overwatch, whatever. They're all saying yes to Dota, and that means really good things for just Dota and everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Did they approach you? Because, I mean, I'm looking at their background, and I even remember hearing about this team from their Call of Duty team, right? They won the first, $1 million tournament or something like that for Call of Duty, I believe it was. But they have a Call of Duty, a Halo, and a Gears of War team, all these, not necessarily first-person shooters, but similar kind of games in that sense. They're kind of branching out into Dota, so did they approach you?
Yeah, so this is their first game that isn't a shooter. They have some, they have some PUBG players, but that's the first time they stepped out of first-person shooters. Or I'm sorry, Gears of War is third person, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So that's it's just mostly just shooters, right? So this is a huge step for them outside of that space. They got into CS:GO a little bit ago, a year and a half ago, and that's been a pretty big hit for them. But yeah, Dota is something unique, and Optic is it's really cool to see the community. I don't know if you got the opportunity to check out that Reddit thread where it's welcoming Optic Dota, but it's just full of people that are actually excited to learn about Dota because Optic has a team.
Yeah.
How many other teams entering this space could you say that about? Very, very little. They have something special going on with this team, and I was always a little hesitant of it and a little skeptical of it, but now being a part of it and seeing the people that are running this org and experiencing their fans firsthand, it's really cool. It's different. It's different than everything else. And I'm excited for the opportunity to bring that to the space. And back to your question, sorry for ranting.
It's fine.
But they approached us amongst a plethora of other teams, and we just kind of shopped around and figured out what we were worth, and Optic made a competitive deal, and we said yes.
So as far as you joining Optic now, okay, so throughout this last year, you not only did some casting, you of course did your podcast show that actually you started up, and it was very successful, I might add. I listened to, I believe, all the episodes myself. However, now you got the grind going again as an actual player. Is there something with Optic that maybe you're going to look to do some content as a player now even? Is that something we can expect?
Yeah, definitely. I think I am definitely interested in doing more podcasts for sure. It was really tough when I was unable to talk about certain things. That's I love doing this right now is because I feel like I can be totally honest and not hold back anything. And I know it's important to keep some things to yourself, but I love the idea of relating through people by just being myself. I think that's cool. I think people can identify with that, just being totally honest. And let's see what else. What was I talking? Doing vlogs and stuff. I really did enjoy that. I went to college for 2.5 years. I did 5 semesters of journalism. Mm-hmm. I've always enjoyed producing content. Whether it's videos or blogs or podcasts or whatever it might be. I love streaming. I just love interacting with the community.
Being a part of Optic Gaming, is there a little bit that's weird almost? Obviously, you're with EG for so long and bleeding blue and everything, and now I guess you're bleeding green with this team here. That's how it works.
Yeah, I've been with EG for a really long time. And I felt very, very close to that brand. I identified with it. I think people thought of EG, and they, maybe they thought of me, or I feel like I was a pretty big part of that brand. And it's different being on OG because that's not really the case. I'm not really the star of Optic. These Call of Duty guys and their community over there is just so massive, and I'm kind of this somebody who's I'm a new family member, right? And I'm not like anxious about it at all. I'm very excited. I think it's not only do I get to convince current Dota fans to become Optic fans and fans of myself, but I also get to bring in new people to the game and have them be able to learn about Dota through being a fan of mine. And that's something that Optic brings, which I think is really, really neat.
So you got your own team to worry about now, but I am curious, and I know many are. Well, first off, are you paying attention at all to EG? Are you maybe watching their games, kind of, thinking like things that they should be doing better, they could be doing better, or are you just focusing on you guys and not worrying about EG at all?
Breaky, this podcast has taken quite the turn from the last time I was on here. I feel like you're digging for some dirt.
Want the answers?
No, it's totally fine. I was surprised that we didn't get to play against EG. I think that'll be a really hype match when we do get to play against EG. I think these storylines and this like drama or whatever you want to call it is like really, really nice for Dota. I think it keeps things interesting when there's more than just a tournament advancement or some prize money on the line. Now there's like a little bit of animosity and a little bit, I don't know, gusto, or I don't know what the best word is for that. But I think it's just fun. And I look forward to the rivalry. Yeah. I hope everybody, I'm friends with all those guys. I consider them friends. I don't know if they consider me friends, but I consider them friends, and I look forward to a little back and forth. Let's have fun with this. Let's make it exciting. Let's hype this stuff up.
As it should be, I think. I think so. You two are obviously already proven to be very good teams, and I have a feeling it's gonna definitely turn into something as several NA teams here throughout the season, man. So, Peter.
Yeah, we have.
Oh, sorry. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like me and Swindlebones, right? Yeah. Like we used to have like our back and forth used to be so intense, right? Like we genuinely hated each other, and that was a lot of drama, but it was exciting. Exactly. And people talked about it, and it was fun. It was fun for some people, and it was like kind of annoying for others. But now I think that Kyle and I can have a really healthy rivalry. And I think I'm totally cool with Kyle, and I think he's totally cool with me. Yeah. And we can just have this back and forth, and even if it's a little exaggerated, why not? Let's just
entertainment, man.
Let's put on a show.
Yeah. It's entertainment. And I know many do appreciate that. So, Peter, it's always a pleasure, man. I really do want to thank you for taking the time to join me on the podcast here.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Any shout-outs, by the way? Any last words for that?
Shout out to the fans of the Defense of the Patience, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Defense of the Patience, yeah.
Yes, Defense of the Patience podcast. And everybody who listens to it. Breaky's been hustling this year. One of the hardest working people in Dota right now, amongst many others. But Grant,
he is doing his thing, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's exciting, man. I love seeing people work hard for what they want, and all the power to them. And yourself.
Appreciate it, man. Always do. And talk to you soon again, man.
Okie dokie.
Okay, so good stuff from PPD right there. Obviously, always great to get the talk with him and check in to see how things are going with that new squad. Of course, just recently being announced with the pickup there of the new team, Optic Gaming. Really excited to see how they continue to advance on now with this roster. And clearly, it's one that's come together. One that I thought was going to take more time, but my buddy ZRock here, who's going to be joining me now, definitely thought otherwise. And I got to say, you were somewhat right, ZRock, on that squad there.
A little bit.
Just a tad.
Yeah, I told you they were going to be good.
We got a lot to talk about, though.
We do.
As you would expect, there's just been so much going on. A lot of these events taking place. We got plenty of results to go over. We're going to also keep you guys updated on the current events that are now taking place for the other qualifiers towards how those are going to be shaping up. But we officially have 2 minors and 1 major set up as far as the teams that are going to be going when it comes to results right here. And I figured it makes sense, of course, to start with the ESL 1 event our first major of the season, as we now know the 8 teams that are going to be going to this event. We mentioned Keen Gaming last week, ZRock. They're definitely a surprising team, but another, I think you could say, somewhat surprising team that is advancing on is Happy Feet out of Southeast Asia.
And not only is Happy Feet advancing, Happy Feet 3-0'd their final. They came out strong in this qualifier, pretty much beat down Clutch Gamers. The rest of the run honestly wasn't the toughest, to be fair. They beat Fire Dragon Esports, a fairly out of shape WG Unity team. It wasn't the hardest run I've ever seen, but they did qualify for it, so they're gonna be there at ESL.
Yeah, and the one team that's almost a little bit surprising, as we'll talk more about throughout, but Mineski, it got knocked out in the quarterfinals actually to a Fnatic squad that has been seeming a little shaky so far with their start and with the roster that, of course, they're bringing over there. But again, seeing Happy Feet, we're talking about the first major of the season. I don't know if that's a team I definitely would have expected, let alone Keen Gaming on top of that. So before we really kind of break down the other results and how things are ultimately shaping up for the event, what do you think about that right there? Is that healthy that our first major is going to include 2 teams that aren't necessarily the biggest or the most well-known organizations, or is that fine?
I think I'm a bit surprised that this is happening in a major, but I think that's just a result of the system they chose. These kind of single-elim playoff brackets for the qualifiers can lead to these huge upsets, and it was a risk ESL had to have known going forward. They're a huge org. They've obviously got very experienced admins setting all this stuff up in the first place. So we're going to have to see. I have a bad feeling that it's only an 8-team major. We have 2 teams that are, for the most part, not very well known. And then you've always got your South American wild card there. And the South American team is to be fair, not the same SG Esports that made a hell of a run in the last major they were in. So with potentially 3 of these 8 teams looking pretty rough, it might be pretty one-sided, but I'm all for experimentation. As you said, first major, we got a lot of them left.
We got a lot of them left, and it also kind of leads me into the format of these qualifiers, and it was single elimination. It did have initial open qualifiers. In fact, 4 open qualifiers that took place, or I guess more so 4 teams from open qualifiers, advancing on to an initial round, and then they had 8 quote-unquote invited teams depending on their tier. They may have got the bye if they were a tier 1 team. But to me as well, that seems a little, I don't know, having single elimination for our first big major, let alone a major in general, to get to it, seems off to me, considering all these minors so far have essentially had some form of whether it's group stages or a double elimination itself. I don't know if you feel the same on that, but it just doesn't seem like it was right for a major.
I'm just not a fan of single elim, period. I think it's a very sloppy way to do it. I think where you get placed on the bracket holds so much weight then. If you're on the upper half and the bottom half is the strong side, you get a much easier road. And then essentially you only have 1, maybe 2 hard series instead of 4 hard series. So I'm not a big fan of single elim. I never have been. But I also understand in the current environment, we have so many games going on that maybe this is the only way some of these teams could fit it in. Maybe this is what they figured out was best. But to me, the majors should be the hallmark of competition. They should be the most fair, even if they're drawn out and longer. They're more prestigious tournaments. I think this is a great format for something like a minor. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed, if I have to be really frank, that this is going to be our first major.
Yeah. It's how it's looking, though, and that's what kind of leads me back to, again, how we started this discussion here, how we do have a couple of these organizations and teams, and nothing against them. Again, they ultimately deserve it because that's how the qualifiers are set up. But, perhaps if it was more of the double M or more of the group stages, any kind of other format, things may very likely could have been different. But props to them. They're going. As far as the other teams that are also going, of course, first, I want to go over to the European qualifier Team Secret real quickly. These guys are on a tear, I gotta say. And yeah. I know you were as well. We're both kind of somewhat skeptical about the roster, maybe, but with the changes that they've made. But they are proving that it was for the right reason. And I was double checking their Dota buff. They are 23-2 in this last month. They've only lost 2 matches.
2
since
games,
they became
right?
this two games, yeah.
Yeah. They went through this entire bracket undefeated. They didn't drop a single game out of their 7 they played here. They just looked dominating. So yeah, it's looking good for Secret, and a lot of these games have been very fast. They had 2 wins under 30 minutes in this tournament. They are indeed just on a tear. And they actually had some good competition in the finals. The field for this tournament, it had some people in it, but with where Secret was placed in the bracket, again, because it was single elim, they didn't really have anyone against them. They were placed on the opposite side of SFT Esports, Mouse Sports, OG, even Kingwin. Like, they didn't have to go through any of those teams. The only notable team really in their bracket was maybe Hellraisers. Yeah. And so this is, again, a fault of the format, but they did have a pretty easy run through this one, to be perfectly honest.
To be clear on that, again, the team that they faced in the finals, SFT Esports, by the way, talk about one of the bigger storylines in the qualifiers in general. Sure, they came up short in the end, but they had to defeat, of course, a very quality team in OG in the quarterfinals. They took them out 2-0, and then they had a 2-1 over Team Kingwin, the former alternate attack squad there, and they've been around forever. So, yeah, SFTE, this has been a team that we've actually casted, both you and I together in some other events even, and, been somewhat impressed by them. So it's kind of fun to see them, being successful and showing that you don't necessarily need to be a squad that's known going into the season. You could definitely almost rise from, an unknown place to an extent, and have success here.
Yeah, and they'll get their chance. They did qualify for one tournament, so we'll see what's going on. But just to run through the Hamburg results so you guys are up to date, as he said, Secret is going to be your European team. EG ended up defeating VGJ Storm 3-0 in North America. And honestly, I think this was probably the hardest qualifier field. Like, favoritism, whatever you want to say, there's a lot of teams, and with the number of teams we've seen qualify for events, NA is just a toss-up right now. Mm-hmm. But, yep, so EG is going to be your NA team. I was a little surprised about the CIS result, though. What about you? Did you get a chance to watch any of that final?
I did not get a chance to watch it, unfortunately, but our boys Virtus Pro advancing on. I can't say that's the most shocking, honestly. But
I'm just a little surprised because, again, I'm going to beat this into the ground, but the format of this set it up. So on one side of the bracket, you had VP, Vega, and Navi.
Yeah.
Who's on the other side? Empire.
Team Spirit, who made it all the way.
Sure. Spirit. Yeah. That's a team that could be making some minors, I think is safe to say. But it's odd.
Could have been better, no doubt. But again, it's the format just constantly beating that in. I do hope that future majors especially see this and realize that, we need to not do this single elimination stuff. Because
I'm okay with an 8-team major, which has received a lot of flack. I think that is, in theory, okay. You invite the top 2 from the last major, and then you then you do your 6 qualifiers. That's okay. But you have to have the best of the best with enough games to prove that, to get them there. But our last result here was Happy Feet taking a 3-0 over Clutch Gamers. We touched on that a little bit. So with Liquid and Newbie, I believe that is going to round out the 8-team field.
Yeah, for our first major, again, it's a mix of, you got the star power, no doubt, you got the big time organizations, but then you have these 3 teams in Keen Gaming, Happy Feet, and SG Esports. It's almost like something just doesn't belong here, but they qualified. We'll see how they perform at this event. I think it's fair to assume, though, that frankly, I'm not expecting too much out of it. However, there is one part. Well, no, we'll get to that later on. So there's another thing we want to talk about, though, with these ESL qualifiers, where not only did we have maybe a format issue, but we also had a situation. I noticed this happening, where a couple of teams were essentially using stand-in players, ringers, whatever you want to call them, for matches where they were using players that played earlier on in the event in some case the same event. And okay, let me just get the examples here because I'm kind of confusing now. Resolution. OG got knocked out, as we mentioned. Resolution then, the very next day, or maybe even later on that same day, he literally rang for Empire in the CIS region qualifier for the same ESL major event. It just happened to be a different region, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was also another situation where Leo Style who plays for Infamous currently, they got knocked out. He then played for Infamous Young later on in that very same tournament in the same region even. To me, that doesn't sound like that should be allowed. And I pointed out on Twitter, I didn't really get much reaction, but something's wrong with that.
I mean, what it comes down to is they're following Valve's rules to the letter. And that may be a fault of the rules. It may be against the spirit of competition, but they are legitimately just following the rules. The rules say you can play in a qualifier with 4 of your 5 players, and the 5th can be a sub as long as you bring your roster without the sub to the LAN. And there's no penalty. So, yes, it is against the spirit of competition. Should there be a rule about it? Maybe. But at the moment, there is nothing in place to stop this from happening as long as it's only one individual player.
So there's nothing in place, and obviously that's why they did it, and they're getting away with it. But are you suggesting that there doesn't need to be something in place? Like, how do you feel about it?
I think it's honestly okay. It leaves kind of a bad taste in my mouth, but the way I see it is one player is not going to make or break a team. And I don't think a lot of these teams are going to really use it maliciously, because I think a lot of times your unit of 5 is probably stronger as a unit of 5 than bringing in a ringer, even if they're individually a better player. Obviously, we saw a little bit different with Empire at TI. You know, Rezo just came in and all of a sudden they look great, like better than they did before. But for the most part, that's a huge gamble, and one I can't imagine too many teams taking. Like, I would have an issue with it if, say, Infamous got knocked out of the qualifier and then they basically just moved all 5 players and took Infamous Young's spot. Like, if that was allowed, that would obviously be a huge issue. You could just use an org with 2 teams to guarantee you get there. But just one player, I don't really have a big issue with. I really don't think it's the end of the world.
Well, my perspective on it is something that you definitely hype up all the time, and you're a big advocate of, is the amateur scene, right? This up-and-coming scene, giving them opportunities as much as possible to get their chances. Mm-hmm. That's my perspective, where I feel like there's this BS mentality, there's this BS idea that a lot of these teams and top-tier players have, that if for whatever reason, if they need a stand-in, they only have a select few people to choose from, and it's just these very top-name players that they happen to have, on their friends list that they can't just rely on because of how the rules are set up right now. Why can't it be a rule to where you have to get somebody that hasn't played in the event, thus forcing teams to get to know more people and get more opportunities for these up-and-coming players? Because there's literally hundreds of thousands of players that play this game. I'm not saying they're going to be great necessarily, but there's still plenty of legitimate players out there that don't get these opportunities.
The issue with an amateur person as a stand-in is you need someone that's been in the competitive structure to the point they understand how to use play calls, how to have the right mindset if they lose their lane but the team is winning. There's a whole bunch of things that you don't get to pick up until you've played at a higher level. And so when you're talking something this big, the chance to go to a major, you want someone that you feel like can slot in a little bit into the structure and isn't going to be totally out of their element. Like, if you grab a random person off the leaderboard, like say you grab the top MMR in a region and they happen to have never played competitive Dota, they're going to be worse than pretty much anyone that's played a tournament in their life that has mattered. Like, there's just a very different way to play Dota. And I understand what you're saying, and I like the idea of it, but I think the fix to that in the long term is getting teams used to having a sub on the roster, like an actual sub. And we're just so far away from that. And that's going to come over a lot of time, stringent rules, and more money being distributed around. Like, I in all honesty, think these teams with 2 teams, Infamous Young, VG, VGJ, like all of these teams should have all of those combined into one team. You should have a 10-man roster and you go trying to be a group and you slot people in and out as you see play. Like, maybe you want to run a Meepo type strat one game and you put your Meepo player in just to affect pick bans. You know, there's other ways to do this, but I really think we need to get more in tune with using subs before I want more of a crackdown on the rules.
That's okay. See, that's a fair point. And that's something that could go down the line. The idea of substitutes being more recognized in the first place. But yeah, no, I just thought I happened to notice it, and it was fascinating to me that was even allowed, especially for our first major this season. But I mean, you make good points. I will say in both cases, it didn't work out in the sense of like helping to win, because in both cases they actually lost their series. Both of them were 2-0 even. So if one of them happened to win, then maybe more of a big deal. But that really even shouldn't be the case. Win or lose, it still felt it still feels icky to me. But you are right. It's not against the rules, and it's something that they probably should look to get developed on, as well as far as all this advancement is going with this new structure and everything. So that's the ESL, though. That's the ESL major. So we got the 8 teams that are in it. They're going to be going. When does it take place? That's later October. That's right. October 26th through the 29th. Our first major in Hamburg, Germany.
About a month.
So about a month from today, the lands are going to start happening now.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks till the first one.
Well, speaking of the first one, Starladder. Starladder is the next one we wanted to talk about here, and that is going to be the first minor/major of the season, in this case, first minor. It starts October 12th. So, yeah, on next week's show, we'll plan to kind of preview it a little bit more. But for this week's show, I want to keep it, fairly shorter in the sense of we'll kind of go over the results right here.
So let's just run through the teams right away. Let's just get that out, and then we can dig into the individual games that got them there. We've got another Liquid Newbie Showdown. They did agree to come to a minor. So we're going to see those two there as well. They're going to be joined by Secret from the European region, Navi from the CIS region, Complexity from North America, SG Esports again from South America, Vici Gaming out of China, and Mineski out of Southeast Asia.
My boys Complexity qualifying for minor. Let's start there. Let's definitely start there. I was excited. I happened to cast that match as well. So, wait, were you casting with me for that one? I've been casting so much.
I did not cast that.
I don't think so. That's right.
I was doing something.
All right. Well, I casted that one, and seeing Complexity win it, not only win it, but Complexity had specifically Dyer's number in this tournament, now known as Optic Gaming, of course. They took them out both in the winter finals and then in the grand finals 2-0. But they even beat Evil Geniuses along the way. And, oh, by the way, they beat Team Leviathan in the first round, who defeated EG in the losers bracket later on in the event. So this was not an easy run for Complexity either, nor is in any NA qualifier.
Let's touch on that Leviathan thing, dude. Leviathan goes on and just takes on big team after big team and shows up in the losers bracket squeaking through. I mean, they barely beat VGJ Storm, 2-1 over them. Then they go on to face EG and come back from a 1-0 deficit and beat them. Then finally they hit the Dyer, and let's be fair, they just kind of got destroyed. But that's a hell of a run for a team that, honestly, their first couple showings looked pretty rough.
You know what despite getting knocked out by Team Dyer, I still think it's overall a huge win for Leviathan, not only defeating EG and BGJ Storm, as you mentioned, but the biggest thing that kind of changed was they made a new addition to the team, right? Where this player Monkeys Forever, joined their roster going into that VGJ Storm series, replacing what was Jenkins at the time. And it seems like that clicked very well for them. In both of those series. But yeah, I mean, the EG series, they were down 1-0. I remember that. The first game went kind of as expected, EG rolling over them. But then game 2 came around. It was specifically, speaking of Monkeys, he played Abaddon in game 2. He had a very high impact game. And then in game 3, he played an Omni Knight even. And he was just a boss at saving teammates left and right in that game, from what I recall or remember there. And thus, they took the series 2-1 over EG. So, yeah, that's the shitty thing about these qualifiers at the same time, is that only the winning team really gets anything out of it. But Leviathan still got something out of it with these results, and if anything, show that they're a team to look out for going forward. So,
indeed, definitely are. So, big props to them for making the run they did. And as you said, Complexity just had Dyer's number. I mean, they 4-0'd them, if you want to call it a best of 7, best of 8 and 9,
best of 7.
Yeah. So just pretty much thrashed them. I mean, they didn't drop a game to who I'm probably calling the top team in North America. Let's be fair. They've ran deep in pretty much everything they've played in. Mm-hmm. So
they played in, I want to say 3 finals now, maybe 4. They qualified for 1, obviously, in the BTS minor there to kick it off. But they've had very deep runs. And NA though, that's the other big thing is that NA just in general, the diversity of teams is absolutely insane that have qualified. That we'll see further as we get into more results here. But as much as we love the NA region, there are other regions.
There are other regions. All right, let's talk about some of the other regions. DCSA managed to get to a final against SG Esports. This is kind of the tier list deciding game right now for South America. DCSA being the team with King Tekka, HFN, Matthew, King RD. This is supposed to be the Chinese superstar team, or South American superstar team. I was thinking of Team DK when I was going to say that and make a reference. But this is supposed to be the mix of the up-and-comer and Matthew, and then just the unequivocal gods of South America and Tekka, HFN, and King RD. These guys are the best players in the region, and they get 2-0'd. And they get 2-0'd in a combined hour.
Yeah.
Like, they were very short games. They were very decisive games. And SG Esports going on to make another qualifier. I don't really know what's going on down here in South America.
Oh, it's SG Esports is looking pretty good so far as the start. That's what's really going on.
And they had a huge battle back in the losers bracket. I mean, they dropped in like the second round, so had to play a lot of extra series. Didn't quite make it. I will say, I never know what to do with this, because in Dota the games are long. One game means a lot. But it kind of sucks if you're the winners final, you win that, you go into the grand finals, and then like the team you just beat makes the run back.
Yeah.
Like Dire versus Complexity. They played Dire twice in 2 series, basically. And yet they got no advantage for beating Dire the first time, other than not having to play the losers bracket series.
Yeah.
Should they be best of 5s and they get a 1-game advantage?
This is an age-old question, man. This has been around for a long time, and personally, I've always felt the advantage is I've liked the idea of the advantage, but because I've been on the other side of the business side of the organization side, and then there's also the spectator side, right? Where from a spectator, that's I think the biggest thing is if you see a team going in with a 1-0 lead, it does take away a little bit of the experience of watching said final matchup, because especially if they win then the first game, it's like it's pretty much over anyways. It feels like the other team has to win 3 in a row at that point. Whereas if you're just going with a clean slate, then from the beginning that it really can go either way, ideally. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then of course, that's the biggest thing really.
And to be fair, there are minor advantages you can give the winners bracket team in Dota. Most tournaments are giving them choice of pick or side right away instead of flipping for it in the grand finals. So if you're the winner bracket, you get at least priority on choosing whether you want first pick, second pick, or Radiant Dire, which is something. It's not as much as it was, say, 2 years ago when Dire had like a 64% win rate versus Radiant, but still something, I guess.
It's a slight advantage. I mean, you're right. It's being an online qualifier. It feels like I will say if you're gonna do no advantage, especially looking to do a best of 5 at the very least, probably makes more sense. Because in this case, all these qualifiers have been best of 3. Other than I think the ESL major one was a best of 5.
Well, and it's odd because China for this was oh, no, that was best of 3 as well. One of these tournaments had a weird best of 5 final in one region. I can't remember which one, but I'll look as I flip through.
Changing it up even, yeah.
But yeah, so we can keep moving forward here. What do we got? China region, we did see Vici Gaming made another very long run through the losers bracket. They got knocked down round 1 against LGD. Wow. And then the full run back to take out LGD FY, even taking out the LGD that knocked them down in the losers finals. So a very, very, very long road for Vici Gaming, a team that I've wanted to see do well with Lanham and 11. It's just a bunch of old hats in the Chinese region showing they can still play.
Got Paparazzi now on that squad. Yeah, he's a fun name to say and fun player to watch. So Vici Gaming, talk about making the run. It's just every time I see these Chinese team brackets, it's just always so impressive. I mean, NA is quickly really getting up there, but I still think China is still where you look at the overall amount of teams, and it's pretty ridiculous what they have to go through.
I've been proud of LGDFY showing that the TI run wasn't some miracle run, that they are a team that will compete, and they're still putting up good results, even this far in. So I was a little nervous maybe this team would fall off after TI, that they had their chance in the spotlight, but showing they're still up there, they're still a team to keep in mind.
CIS, Na'Vi.
Yeah.
Na'Vi qualifying. I'm sure that I made a point of this. I'm sure the organizers are very excited for this. With Na'Vi qualifying, of course, a large fan base.
Yeah.
I expect to be there.
That's a huge thing with Na'Vi making that qualifier. Yes, there is a little bit of an asterisk in the fact that VP wasn't there, but still, beating Empire, Vega, Spirit making another grand final, though. I mean, I'm glad Navi's there. I'm super excited to see Na'Vi at a tournament again. It's going to be a lot of fun, but Spirit is actually showing themselves to be a contender in some of these.
Yeah.
They're making it deep in a lot of these playoff brackets.
I've been saying that since last season, too. You know what? I've been saying that more than you have, so...
You have.
I'm glad you're finally realizing that Team Spirit is a team to reckon with.
Let me know once they
CIS.
actually make something, though. That's going to be the break point.
They're getting close, damn it. As you pointed out, 2 of these finals already. These qualifiers. So, but Na'Vi, talk about this new roster with them. Of course, Crystallize and Roger even stepping in for them. It's a roster that's been working. It's been clicking, and Na'Vi is officially back. I think is safe to say. I mean, now we have to wait and see how now the LAN results. See, this is the funny thing right now because we're just seeing all this regional competition, this very strict regional competition. We're not seeing how they're all competing against each other yet when it comes to the big LAN event. So that's going to be, that's what I'm fascinated with.
With the way Valve structured the system, though, that's all you need to do. You can bring back enough money to live if all you do is beat your region. Because we have guaranteed qualifier slots, which it has its perks, it has its downsides, but in reality, that's what matters, is just showing up and getting there.
Mm-hmm. So Na'Vi taking this one from CIS, and then Southeast Asia, as you mentioned, Mineski taking
Miracle
over
run.
TNC.
They didn't drop a game. Another team that ran all the way through the bracket and didn't drop a single game.
Mm-hmm.
And their run wasn't super easy. Clutch Gamers, Execration, TNC. I mean, they hit most of the big teams.
Well, this was the beginning of a run for Mineski where, well, again, we'll go over this a little bit more as well, but let's just say they've already qualified for 3 qualifiers out of Southeast Asia. They also qualified for the PGL as well as the Dota Pit event that is still going on for most of the other regions. But not only going undefeated in here, but Mineski is really showing that they are the dominant team in Southeast Asia right now with how things are shaping up, obviously. So outside of the ESL Major, they're not going to the Major because they're going Happy Feet with the big... By the way, I'm noticing Happy Feet wasn't even in this tournament now that I'm looking at it, and yet they qualified for the Major. So that's something else to take into consideration. But yeah, Mineski, they're proving to be the dominant team in Southeast Asia right now. That's the point again.
Yeah, absolutely. They really are. And last but not least, Secret did manage to take out OG, taking the European qualifier spot. This was where I think Secret's only 2 losses so far have come from were in this tournament. 1 game to Mouse Sports and 1 game to OG. Other than that, I mean, these guys have just been dominating.
And by the way,
anything else to say.
Well, they've also been doing it with the ringer a lot of the time. We forgot to mention that Fata's actually, he was only, I mentioned they were 23-2. Fata is 11-0 with the team. So they're undefeated with Fata, but he's only played 11 of the 25 games. He hasn't even played half the games for the team. There was some family emergency, some family issue came up, I guess, that he had to take care of. But they've been using a couple of different ringers in place, and they've still been having this great success. I think that's a crazy thing on top of their success that you really have to keep in mind.
Yep, I've been very impressed. Both of their qualifier spots, Hook played in for them. A guy that was on the Balkan Bears roster way back in the day for a little while, but really hasn't played competitive Dota in like the last 2 years. So super cool to see the team still managing to put up results with a ringer.
Mm-hmm. So this leads into the final point I wanted to bring up about Starladder before moving on to another event. In that, with Starladder specifically being the first minor coming up here, the first really big LAN event even of the season, again, the invited teams were Liquid and Newbie. Of course, understandable, the number 1 and 2 teams from TI. Liquid and Newbie have both still yet to play a single game since TI7 finished, by the way. So I wonder what should we expect from them, right? Like, it's the same roster. It is, as of right now, we know it's going to be the same patch, unless a patch comes out in the next week here, but...
That's the big thing right there. When we saw CDEC make a hell of a run at TI and then everyone was wondering, will they keep it up? Will they keep it up? Well, there was a patch change. They tried to keep doing what got them second in TI, and it failed miserably. Most of these teams that do exceptionally well at a TI, the next big patch, they've got to relearn and they kind of fall back down. But with this being the same patch, I really expect these to still be our 1 and 2 seeds going into these tournaments.
Part of me wants to suggest that Liquid and Newbie, more so even Liquid, I guess, but I'm sure they're doing a lot of scrimmaging, so they're getting plenty out of that. But what about just playing in some of these random online tournaments, like the Pro Dota Cup, a $5,000 tournament, just to get some practice, right? Just to get some tournament play. And that feels like to me that might be a good idea to do, but I don't know. I'm not a TI7 winner, so
yeah, it depends on their mentality coming back from TI, right? Was it, okay, we're kind of a little burned out. This was a lot of Dota and a lot of prep to come here. We need our own break, and they're kind of resting, or was it that they should have rode the hype train a little bit and, as you said, played a few things and just kept the ball rolling? But from a fan base perspective, from an organizational perspective, if you play in something like a Pro Dota Cup after winning TI and you don't win it, it looks really bad. Versus if you play it and win it, it's expected. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there was really a lot for them to gain prior to this. They just didn't have any real incentive to play in anything.
Yeah. And then one more thing about Starladder too, before advancing on. Out of the 2 minors and 1 major we have completed so far, I think the Starladder to me is looking like the best potential main event as far as overall great competition.
It has complexity in it. What are you talking?
Of course.
I'm
God
kidding,
damn it.
I'm kidding.
Of course, that's why.
All in all, you're right. It is looking pretty good. We've got Liquid Newbie, which obviously we still have at Hamburg. But then if you look at the regional results, they're pretty expected for the regions. China's obviously still a toss-up, but it's a team that at least is in the toss-up of teams qualifying there. Mineski obviously dominating their region, Secret dominating theirs. I agree with you. This is looking like the best spread of teams so far.
And so that leads us into the PGL, the last event that has been fully completed here as far as the qualifiers. So the PGL Open Bucharest, first off, a very confusing name, but PGL Open Bucharest, it is a minor tournament that will take place shortly after Starladder, set to October 19th. Is when it kicks off. Now, this is the event where Evil Geniuses and LGD were the invited teams, and then we have the roster now of Immortals out of North America, Digital Chaos South America out of South America, Secret, of course, out of Europe, Na'Vi out of CIS, Mineski, again out of Southeast Asia, and then VGJ Thunder out of China, keeping the diversity going over there as well. But so there's several things to bring up here. First off, sticking again with North America, I think let's just start there. Immortals, they took their qualifier and kept again this whole idea of diversity of teams in the NA region as they took out Dire in the finals 2-1.
Yeah, Immortals, a team that I wanted to at least make one LAN because I think they're going to be better internationally than they are regionally. So we're going to have to see what they can do getting back to a LAN. I mean, how is MVP going to look? I've been waiting to see them play again for a long time. And the rest of their qualifier results were pretty rough, to say the least. Mm-hmm. They didn't make deep runs in most of them. They didn't really look that great. So managing to squeak through in this kind of interesting format, it was a GSL format into just a quick single elimination 4-team playoff.
Yeah.
Squeaking through the Dire. And all of their series were close. I mean, it was 2-1 against DC, 2-1 against Dire, and they were not the top seed coming out of their group either.
Nope. Yeah, they lost 0-2 to Complexity in the groups. They did too well their opponents there on those victories, but yeah, in the playoffs as well, 2-1, 2-1 as mentioned right there. So obviously was not an easy run, as none of it is, especially in NA, but I'm with you, especially because, again, this organization, you've really hyped up the idea of their owner and how great it is for this organization to be in Dota 2, and it's definitely sold me on it. So seeing success for their team very quickly after they get picked up is I think it's just only good for everyone, right? It's just healthy.
I mean,
for
if
the
you haven't
scene.
noticed, Noah's jumped into like every Reddit post on our Dota 2 that made front page about his team.
Yeah.
He's involved. He likes to be involved. He likes talking to people. He doesn't really like to keep a lot of things secret. He just kind of lets people know what's happening. is he's a little bit distracted at the moment, taking care of his CS:GO team.
Oh gosh,
there's a whole bunch of drama there, but Immortals is going to be making a land, and honestly, I think this field is more balanced than any other we have. Like, I think Liquid and Newbie are huge question marks. I'd still say they're the 1-2 seeds in their tournaments, but in this one, with EG and LGD in their place, I think this looks like the most balanced tournament. I couldn't tell you who's going to win this or who's the favorites going into this one.
Yeah, again, we'll preview more as we get closer, but I just off the top of my head, I see what you're saying. The VGJ Thunder throws me off a little bit out of China.
It's still got Sylar. That guy's a monster.
Yeah, he is a great player. I'm looking at the qualifiers for China right now, actually, kind of looking at that, and okay, yeah, that was mainly all the teams you would expect here. Keen Gaming Luminous, even. Okay, yeah, that was an open qualifier team. So another Keen Gaming squad, but yeah, the direct invited as expected. So, I mean, they had to make a run. They got knocked down to losers they got to the winners finals. So they lost to LFY, then they beat IG, and then they beat LFY again in the grand finals. So, yeah, definitely deserve it. Okay, fine. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's a pretty good litmus test. See,
it is.
This qualifier was different than the other qualifiers. This one, they did a double limb bracket from the very start instead of doing GSL. Very, very odd there. But we'll preview the tournament coming up here next week's show. We've got a little bit of time on that one. But let's keep moving forward. We got more to cover.
PGL will probably be 2 weeks from now. Star Ladder we'll preview next week.
Yeah, true.
It's going to be a lot of that coming on as we get started with the LAN events there. All right, so yeah, those are the ones that I've finished up now. Now we have a couple that are in progress. We do have a couple of results from them. The first one being the Dota Pit minor. This is set to take place in November. The invited teams for this one were announced: Liquid and Newbie. The invited squads there. So again, no surprise. Another minor that they're going to. That's actually, I think, kind of important to address. Like, the first minor, sure, that makes sense, but the second minor, maybe this is going to be a little bit of it. Maybe they are planning to play in
I don't like
multiple
this.
Minors.
I really don't like this. I don't want to see your potential 1-2 teams in the world playing minors. The first one, sure. It's the first tournament after TI. You got to go. But anything after that, the point values have been set to make it so that it's really not that meritorious to go to a minor. And yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see, man. It's still early. They had to accept it before they knew how they did in the first minor.
Yeah. I will say the month of November is pretty empty. There's only 2 minors in November. And so that maybe, I'm sure, influenced their decision a little bit, that they didn't want to go a whole month without playing in a big event.
Sure.
So that's probably why in the end. But I mean, I'm with you, though. I mean, we've definitely agreed on this, that for these minors especially, ideally, it should be more opportunity for not lesser teams, but different teams. It ideally should not just be Newbie and Liquid, and if it's not them, then EG and LGD. That's basically the point. So we'll see how that continues. But as far as teams that have qualified, this is going to be Virtus Pro making an appearance here out of CIS, of course. So it's going to be their first minor. Of course, they're going to the major, as we saw, but they're going to.
My minor little tangent here about Dota Pit. I love this format that they use for these qualifiers. 4 direct invites, 0 open qualifier teams, double elimination bracket, best of 5 final. It is the hallmark of what I want, but I don't want it in a minor. I want it in a major. I want your minors to have open qualifier teams because I want this to be the chance to run yourself up if you're a new amateur team trying to break on the scene, versus having 4 direct invites. For a major, I think this kind of system is the best way to get the best of the best on a global stage, where you're taking your top 4 in a region that aren't already invited, you pit them up against each other in a very competitive, very balanced format, and then you get one winner coming out of it. I really love this format. I just wish this was what like Hamburg used, and then Dota Pit used Hamburg's. I think that would have been great. But super competitive format. We're gonna see VP get there after a pretty solid performance, to say
no
the
losses.
least.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
Destroyed Empire multiple times, which was a huge confidence booster after what happened at TI.
Yeah, I would say so. On the format real quickly, first off, Dream League, they're running this, but with an open qualifier team. So it sounds like, yeah, that's exactly what you would like to see. And of course, there being a minor. I will say, from that perspective, though, like, say if this was a major, if I'm Vega Squadron, I'm pissed off that team spirit gets over me, right? Like, that's where it becomes so difficult when you have just purely direct invited for a qualifier like this.
Well, and we're early yet. Again, that can't be stressed enough. We don't have the scene shaping up yet. We don't have actual results to really use. All we have are these qualifiers. And once you get to a couple minors being played and the majors have some more info to look at, you'll know, okay, well, Vega made it to a minor and they got 8th. Spirit made it to a minor and they got 16th. All right, well, we're inviting Vega to the next qualifier then. Like, we just don't have the results yet.
Well, and that's where you can see organizations start using the points adding up even. So they'll just go with like the top 4 points from that region. Like that, yeah, that to me would make more sense. But again, they're at the same time, they don't have to. That I think is where this issue. And in fact, I talked with PPD in the interview earlier about this. This is something he brought up. Of course, he made the tweet about it. The idea that there isn't that set rule from Valve necessarily. I mean, as we see here at Dodo Pit, they can invite teams to qualifiers to then qualify for their main event. There's no chance for an unknown or a lesser team out there to even have a shot at qualifying.
Well, I remember way back when the Pro Circuit got announced, this was one of the things I warned about or I mentioned, that there is no obligation for these orgs to make sure any random team can do it. All it says is there has to be a qualifier. In theory, they only had to have 2 teams. They could have just put VP against Na'Vi, winner goes. There's your regional qualifier. Like, they could. That's the thing. And that's both good and bad. It gives flexibility to the orgs, which I like. And I think 4 teams from each region is enough to get, in general, the strongest team in the region. Mm-hmm. I think if you start looking at regions and find me a 5th best team that could make a qualifier run consistently, I don't think there's very many of them.
Yeah, NA and China are the only 2 right now, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and even if I took NA and I'm looking at the top 4 teams and then looking at a 5th, what 5th could win a double limb bracket with a best of 5 final? Like, this format is much more competitive than a lot of these other ones that, the 5th best teams have made it
Yeah,
through.
That's fair.
Like, I'm going to be honest, it's going to be hard for Complexity to make a run in this bracket. Like, Optic is more than likely going to just decimate this entire tournament.
Wait, you're telling me
they drop one?
The team that's qualified for 2 qualifiers already for minors is going to have trouble?
You want to talk about the format of the tournaments that Complexity made it into?
No.
I love Complexity.
I just want to talk results.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking in hypotheticals.
Yeah. I mean, you are as of right now, they are in the losers bracket, as you're pointing out. They did lose to Optic Gaming, so stopping their run that they had here in the North American section. But they're still
like the way this 4-team double elimination works is if you lose your first round, you have to play every other team to get there.
Yep.
You end up playing all 3 other teams to make the run. So highly competitive format. I got to give huge props to Dota Pit for using this. I think this is by far and wide the best way to find the best team out of the people you invite.
Oh, this is interesting, actually. I'm actually just noticing this. So NA did have an open qualifier. So
yeah.
So CIS, hold on, let's check this then. China was all invited.
SCA was 4 direct invites. I think every other region was 4.
Europe had an open as well.
Okay.
So, and then South America, nobody knows. But
that's
Europe,
cool. I mean, if it makes you wonder how they chose it, though, right? Like,
yeah.
There was no IGV. There was no, as you said, there was no Vega Squadron.
Clearly, no evil geniuses. By the way, that's also something that worth pointing out. EG not competing in this, who happen to choosing not to. I assume they did not play in the open qualifiers, as they would have been invited. So, yeah, that's well, by the way, 5 teams. Okay, and I was thinking about this because you have these 4 teams and then you have EG on top of it. So right now, NA is... I'm glad they had an open qualifier, I guess is the point of that then.
I'm actually looking at it. The finals were against VGJ Storm in the open qualifier.
Which makes sense.
And IX Mike had a stack that made top 4, so that was cool.
So yeah,
other than that...
So looking through... I think China's the one then if they're going to do this that they should have had an open qualifier in China for sure, but
yeah,
they did not. They invited the 4 teams, but everything else does make sense to me then.
Yep. So for anyone listening, this is ongoing for the rest of the regions that we have not talked about. This is running as we speak, and the finals for it all, I believe, are all tomorrow. So Saturday on the 30th will be the grand finals for all of these qualifiers.
Oh, yeah. Complexity DC plays later today after this recording here. Nice. Friday night. Immortals Optic Gaming is before that, too. Oh, damn. We got a fun night.
Yeah, there's a lot of Dota tonight.
As there has been every day. All right, so that's the Dota pit, though. Mentioned going on. What is the last one here to bring up? Perfect World. The Perfect World event that's also been running here. Who also has a very confusing name, by the way. The Perfect World Masters. That's also a minor. So,
I'm just waiting for a tournament to call themselves a major when they're a minor.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. Yeah, exactly. Like, come on, let's try to figure this out here. Perfect World Masters is currently going on. There have been a couple results. I've already touched on it a little bit. Complexity. This was the second one they qualified for out of NA. They had to defeat Digital Chaos, so we were on the verge of seeing a fifth team out of NA qualify for a fifth different minor major, which again is just absurd. That's insane. That really is.
Yeah,
to think.
And DC beat Complexity early on in this tournament.
Yeah, they did.
So Complexity had to have the run back and play against DC again. Traditionally a fairly big rival for them, and as you said, Complexity did manage to hang on. They did qualify.
And I was excited. I will say that. I was definitely excited to see that.
Say.
No, it's a good moment for them. Although I wouldn't have been really disappointed because at the same time, Moon Meander, and I would have been fine both seeing a fifth team qualify in with Moon Meander especially, but definitely excited that Complexity qualified for the Perfect World here. Other teams qualify. Go ahead.
I mean, this is honestly, real quick to touch on NA, this was the most disappointing result Dire had. They dropped 2-1 to Immortals here early on in the tournament. Then VGJ Storm played against them, and they actually had another conflict and had to back out of this tournament.
That's right, yeah.
Basically, they couldn't play their losers bracket match. So had they played it, I mean, it could have been Dire Complexity in the losers bracket round 3
They would have
well.
lost anyways, so.
Yeah. Probably. But either way, tons of competition in NA. And if you look at this way, like the way this bracket went, though, your open qualifier teams didn't do anything. You only had 5 teams even winning games. Like, I'm all for open qualifiers. I think in the minors, you need them. They do add a lot of up-and-coming competition. But NA seems like it's become so stratified, and we've got our top, 6 teams that are going to do something. And the gap between them and the next best team is so far.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Blue Pikachu's had a lot of competitive games lately and hasn't taken a single game. Rattletrap has also been in, I believe, 2 qualifiers and not taken a single game. It seems like there's a very wide gap right now.
Blue Pikachu was one of the invited teams even to this event, by the way, for the regional qualifiers. It was Rattletrap and SF Express were the qualifier teams that played in it. So another case where EG is not in it. So we are seeing that where EG is saying, you know what, these are minors. Let's not waste our time. Let other teams have their shots at it. Something we need to talk about this format, by the way, though. Secret and SG Esports are 2 other teams that are already qualified, but this is also a little bit different. This kind of goes back to, as you've been really making a point of, there is no set format that these events need to do. In this case, for the Perfect World Masters, they're set up to do what's 10 teams at the LAN event, and 4 of them are going to be China, because Newbie and LFY are the invited teams, and then you have 2 China qualifiers on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where that's starting to come into play now, where you even mentioned this as this format came out of, I'm going to see some regions taking bias towards their own.
Yeah, and this is the second one to do it, because DreamHack already announced we're going to have 6 Euro teams, I believe, for their 16. So there's already been one other organization saying, we're a regional group, we want our region overrepresented in our tournament. And honestly, I think that's fine. Valve did a good job in making sure every region got some type of tournament if they could afford it, and they proposed it. There really wasn't any bias in where the tournaments were going. So all in all, I think it's okay. I don't think this is... I mean, it's not like they're doing 16 teams, right, and just inviting the 8 Juggernaut Chinese teams.
Mm-hmm.
and trying to just stack half the bracket as Chinese and then manipulate the bracket or anything. It's just, hey, we're a little more stacked with our region.
Which to an extent they are. So they're not wrong there. But as I've always kind of gone back to whenever I see this being brought up, the idea that, oh, there's something's fishy going on, we need to fix it immediately. It's early on in the season. This is a trial season of sorts. It's early on. Let's kind of let it develop before we make these ultimate reactions.
Well, and there's nothing stopping an org from doing this, and I don't think it's bad. Like, when we get the BTS minor, like, who's to say they don't just bring 5 NA teams?
Well,
like, we can do that in every region.
The biggest thing is the answer from Valve was that only the top 4 teams get points. I mean, that pretty much makes it so no matter how much you want to stack it, because you have to at least have one from each region, only giving the top 4 teams points, technically it's still, fair.
Yeah, the only way to really manipulate it would be, as I said, you bring like 8 teams from your region and you just don't even do a group stage, you just seed them into a double limb bracket, and then it's like all China on one half, so you're guaranteed top half. But we haven't seen anything like that abusive. We really haven't. And all in all, I think this is totally fine for now. I like seeing this kind of thing. It also brings in a better crowd for the LANs, which can't be understated. Like, LAN ticket sales outside of TI have not been very good. Mm-hmm. I was at the Shanghai Major. It was fairly empty until like the last day, and even then it wasn't super full. I know the Germany tournaments have always been fairly low attendance as well. If you get more teams from the region, you get more people to come. Just that simple.
Yeah. Understandable. Again, from the business perspective, that's completely understandable that they're doing it with a format such as this. Just as Dream League's doing it for EU and CIS. All right, that's...
And for the listeners here, this is also, I believe, wrapping up tomorrow on the 30th. So, again, we'll see the end of the Chinese qualifier, as well as CIS and Europe all coming together tomorrow. So if you're up for some early Dota, that will be then.
Ooh, by the way, I'm looking at the China region on it, the first qualifier that's going on. There's a team called Eclipse. It's this is a team with Shadow. That's right. They're one of the open qualifier teams. This is Shadow's new squad, playing with June, Sep, JDH, and a guy named Zzz. A lot of Z's. And they're in the winter finals right now against LGD. That is something to look out for in this tournament.
Well, and it's funny because the other open qualifier team, another Wings player, Blink's on it.
You're right. NGA Gaming, yeah. They are already knocked out, though. So
yep. So him and Ice Ice are on that roster. So definitely 2 potential new teams to look out for coming up in the China region. Yeah, China has just a lot of teams that are vying for a place, like for a home,
Yeah. So those are the events going on. Obviously, we'll have updates and results to preview next week, to go over next week, as well as preview the first minor then to start here. But the other talking points, we've really already kind of gone over them. So that can kind of lead us into the just a couple of roster updates to make before officially wrapping up for the show here. The first one being mid or feed. Now, this was an interesting situation because something we obviously have going on. There's just so much Dota happening. Saxa from mid or feed.
We can't call it the Saxa stack now that Saxa's no longer in it?
I've been calling it the Wii stack anyways. So, but yeah, so Saxa announcing that he's actually stopping competitive Dota 2 for now. Let's just say this team hasn't been having maybe the greatest results. / they've been a little frustrated with the invites of the qualifiers. They've had to play in open qualifiers and stuff. So kind of looking a little deeper into it, this feels to me like Sox is essentially just quitting on this team. And which he has every right to do, but it's early, man, and you can't be having that attitude if you have any chance.
Well, I feel like he took a shot, right? He wanted to give it a shot. He played the first round of stuff. It didn't go well. They weren't getting the invites that he thought they kind of deserved. And I'm not going to say this is him quitting Dota. It's him quitting this team. And that's fine. He can still play stuff like FPL. He can still be around the scene. He can sub for teams. I mean, he'd be a great sub to have around. He's very, very smart. He can slot into the 4 or the 5. And if he does find a team that works well for him, maybe he'll jump right back in. But it was a less than graceful way of leaving the team. Just all of a sudden there was a Twitter post, yeah, our captain's gone.
Well, wait, no, I'm looking at it right now. Weeha. My captain left the team and is taking a break. GG. Like,
Yeah.
when a tweet like that happens, you know that it just kind of came out of nowhere for them. So, and Tomato moved to Euro for, like, this is, again, this was ideally going to be a powerhouse team even in Europe as down the line, but they had a rough start. He quit. Now, not only was he their 4%, but he was also going to be their captain. So now you're kind of stranded without a couple things. That's where Cinderin comes in.
I think he will work out better on the roster than Soxa did, honestly. He's older, he's got more experience, he's a calmer person, and that's what you need when you have young guns like Weeha and Tomato. These guys still need someone to temper them down a little bit. You know, they get hyped, they get very excited, but they also get very down on themselves. You need that guy to kind of level them out and say, guys, it's okay. We're fine, relax, keep playing. I think he can bring a lot to this team. There's still a ton of question marks, and they still have to get all the pieces together. But I think he's going to slot in very, very nicely to this team.
100% agree with you. This is the first thing that I brought up when I saw this roster was, dear God, you know, who's going to lead them and how is that going to work with this being a very young team? But Cinderin is one of those guys that stands out as he'll be able to take care of it. So when he announced that he was leaving his previous squad, by the way, which was called No Diggity here, he was actually on the squad of what was Jonas Van Hanskin, Era, and Mage, an up-and-coming player. Kind of saw that as a possibility, and sure enough, we saw it come to fruition now. And that leads now into Era, Jonas Van, and Hanskin. They did announce that they're going to specifically, those three are in the process of trying to form a new team now as well. So, again, those guys, you know, dear to my heart, for obvious reasons, with the Han background, always intrigued to see where they end up. They didn't have the greatest last year with Alliance, so we'll see.
Yeah, unfortunately, all of these players still kind of at the point they need to make a name for themselves. They made a name in Han, sure, but in Dota, they've pretty much all struggled for a while. They're going to be a team to look for in major or minor qualifiers. They're not going to be a team getting direct invites to much. Whoever they do find it, it's looking like a rough road for them, to say the least.
Maybe Soxa will join up with these guys.
That would actually just be hilarious.
That would be. Just like trade it full on, yeah. Just bring back Mage and just bring Soxa in and be like, all right, well, we swapped players. Let's see how this works now. No, I don't know. I don't know what to expect with them, but hopefully they find a home. But I am with you there. They definitely still have plenty to prove when it comes to their play. Okay. I think we actually made it through, kind of recapping what's going on, previewing a little bit, taking a look at what's happening throughout this week and going into the next one. So that's what we wanted to accomplish, and I think we did, ZRock.
All right. So one last little thing to tie the show up. Who's winning Dota Pit North American qualifiers? Take your bias out and give me an honest prediction. You got Optic, Immortals, Complexity, and DC left. Complexity, DC in the losers bracket, Optic, Immortals in the winners.
God, you are right that if, like, Complexity, I've been high on them, especially with the run they've had against Dire, but now Optic, but them losing to Optic makes me feel like that's now going to change a little bit again. I'm going to say Optic. I think they're going to ride the hype train. I had PPD on earlier. Why not?
Yeah. I would have taken them too, but since you took them and I can't agree with you, I'll give it to Immortals. We'll have something to have a grudge about next week. But
honestly, I would love to see DC. I really would, because I would love to see this whole idea of just these top 5 teams in NA all getting some sort of minor major invite early on, or qualifying early on.
It would definitely be cool, but DC's just looked like they've got some issues to work out. They're making some runs. It would be cool to see them string one together, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's enough talking for me today.
Enough talking today. All right. Good one, Zach. Good one. No, but that's...
I got Dota to watch, man.
I know,
we got some Optic Immortals coming up.
We do. We got to wrap this up. We're already running late with this podcast, obviously, as far as it being postponed. It's just been so much going on, a lot of casting, and I came up last night after I did this bar trivia that I host on Thursday nights as well, and this is late in the night, and I was exhausted, man. So that's why we waited to today, but so we do apologize for that, for being a little bit later on, but we got it out. hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and looking forward already to the season is underway. We're already getting results, and we're looking forward to now previewing our first LAN minor even coming up next week in the next week's show. Also, who knows what kind of guests we're going to continue to have. Big shout out once again to Peter, aka PPD, for joining us earlier on in the show here. And obviously, thanks again to ZRock. Having some fun discussion as always. Thanks for tuning in, guys. The DotPro Show wrapping up. Have a good night. We'll see you next time.